Peaches, plums, and apples. We all love to eat them, whether they are large or small, green, red, or yellow. So tempting are these colorful orbs, they are said to have brought about man's fall in the Garden of Eden. So powerful is their force, they helped Newton discover the law of gravity. Hello, I'm Rennie Jones with the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service. Here in the South, farmers produce almost every type of fruit there is, from peaches and plums to apples, nectarines, and pears. Producing these fruits takes a lot of hard work and attention to detail. However, one of the key ingredients for success is effective pruning and training. In the next several minutes, we'll be exploring the proper methods for pruning and training your fruit trees. First, we'll take a look at some of the pruning tools that you'll need. Then we'll talk about the advantages of pruning and training. Once we have introduced you to these and 4 other important considerations, we'll take you through the process of pruning and training your fruit trees. Before we begin, however, let's take a look at the tools that you will need. Proper tools will take you a long way toward training success. Your pruning supplies should include hand pruning shears, lopping shears, and a good pruning saw. Pruning shears are used to cut smaller branches from your trees. Lopping shears help you to remove more medium-sized branches. Finally, you will use a pruning saw to sever larger branches or limbs. Once you learn to use these tools effectively, you can maximize your pruning efforts. Proper pruning and training of fruit trees offers 5 major advantages. These advantages include the ability to strengthen the structure of your trees, to dwarf your trees for increased manageability, to increase the fruitfulness of trees you want to grow, to encourage earlier fruiting of trees, and to facilitate spraying and other maintenance chores. As you will see in the next 15 minutes, the time that you will spend on pruning and training will be well worth the effort when your trees begin to bear fruit. How do you determine the most appropriate method for accomplishing these tasks? By understanding the basics of fruit tree pruning. Once you have the knowledge that you need to prune trees properly, you can begin the task of effectively training your fruit trees. The outcome of your pruning efforts depends largely on knowledge of 4 key factors: the flowering habits of fruits, the pruning methods that are available, the ultimate size of the tree you're planning to prune, and appropriate times to prune various trees. Let's start with factor number 1, the flowering habits of fruits. Fruit trees are generally classified into 2 major types depending on their flowering habits: prunus fruits, such as peaches, nectarines, and plums, and palm fruits like apples and pears. In general, prunus fruits flower on wood that is 1 year old and respond better to heavier pruning. In contrast, palm fruits generally flower on older wood and are more receptive to a lighter pruning touch. As a result of these differences, you will need to take a slightly different approach to pruning each type. As a rule, you'll prune fruits such as peaches, nectarines, and plums using the open center approach. For apples and pears, you'll employ the central leader system or a slight modification. However, with either method, you will use 2 basic pruning cuts. Heading back cuts allow you to cut back a portion of a branch in order to stimulate new growth near the cut. Thinning out cuts, on the other hand, allow you to reduce new growth by removing branches back to their point of origin. Although pruning can be a dwarfing process, the ultimate size of the tree is affected by your selection of rootstock. Apples are often grafted onto dwarf or semi-dwarf rootstocks in order to reduce the size of the tree. Dwarfing apple trees in this fashion has several advantages. The process allows you to harvest, prune, and maintain your orchards more efficiently and effectively. Unfortunately, pruning is the only means of dwarfing peach trees due to the lack of adaptable dwarfing rootstocks. The later summer pruning is done, the more dwarfing you will accomplish. Timing is the final factor that you will need to consider when making pruning decisions. Proper timing is particularly important for prolonging the life of your trees and maximizing their overall fruitfulness. During the first few years in the life of a palm or prunus tree, summer pruning is used primarily for training purposes. This process involves the removal of undesirable branches or suckers and the direction of growth. In contrast, winter pruning extends the life of your trees and generally should be conducted in late winter months. February is an excellent time to prune all trees, especially peaches and plums. Now that you have an understanding of the role these four factors play in fruit tree maintenance, let's talk about the proper training of prunus fruit trees. As mentioned earlier, peach and plum trees are generally trained to an open center shape. This shape is accomplished through detailed and selective pruning that begins at the time the trees are planted. To train your trees into an open center shape, cut the tree at about 24 to 32 inches above the ground and remove all branches that are below 18 inches. Leave the best 3 or 4 major scaffold branches intact. During the first 2 or 3 years of growth, you will need to prune prunus trees during the summer. If the scaffold branches are growing in such a way that they are too upright, pinch them back to an outwardly positioned bud. Use as your guideline an angle of approximately 45 degrees. This angle will allow your tree to carry a good fruit load without breaking limbs. If a large limb develops in a poor position, wait until late in the growing season to remove it from the tree. Doing so will allow the tree to use and store food that is made by leaves on that limb. A limb in the center of the tree will also help the other limbs spread more outwardly. For best results with summer training, make sure that you water your prunus trees well, fertilize them according to soil test recommendations, and control weeds and pests. By the end of the first summer, your trees should begin to take on the typical open center shape. Winter pruning the first year involves selecting scaffolds for future fruiting. To accomplish this task, you will need to prune 3 or 4 evenly distributed branches that have a good angle. If possible, select branches that are slightly apart and growing vertically on the trunk. This method will make the tree stronger than if you had selected limbs that are vertically close together. After you select the scaffold branches that you want to prune, cut the branches back to within 24 to 36 inches of the trunk. Pruning branches in this fashion will encourage lateral branching of the limbs and will aid you in selecting subscaffolds during future pruning. Allow the uppermost scaffold to be 4 to 6 inches higher than the others to maintain tree vigor. Additionally, you will need to remove any other upright or downward growing branches and those branches that may interfere with primary scaffold growth. During the second summer after you have planted your trees, confine your pruning to the removal of suckers and water sprouts while they are young. To encourage more upright growth, pinch branches that grow downward to an outward positioned bud or branch. Avoid any heavy pruning during this time. In the winter, after the second growing season, you should begin to select and prune subscaffolds. Like primary scaffolds, the previous winter, well-established subscaffolds can be headed back as much as 24 to 36 inches above their attachment. If there are too many subscaffolds, remove some by using a thinning out cut. Always cut them back to an outwardly growing branch or bud. You will also need to remove large, poorly positioned limbs that are growing from the main scaffolds, as well as any upright, vigorous shoots in the center of the trees. Leave most of the less vigorous and flatter angled lateral branches. Doing so will allow your trees to develop an adequate amount of fruit wood. If you carefully prune and train prunus fruit trees during their first 2 years of life, you can avoid any heavy pruning later. you will have established a good scaffold system and encouraged spreading branches by equally distributing the weight of the fruit on the limbs. After the second growing season, limit your efforts to light corrective pruning. This will allow you to keep the center of the trees open and the main branches well spread. Short branches near the base of large scaffold limbs are responsible for bearing large fruit buds. In instances where a number of excess branches exist, you may want to thin them out to allow light to reach the center of the tree. Remove any branches that are growing straight into the center of the tree, as well as those branches that are pointing in a downward direction. However, do not remove all excess branches. These limbs are often the first twigs on the tree to bear fruit. During the third year, thin out and shorten inside twigs to prevent shading of the center. Such shading prevents desirable shoot growth in the center and the development of highly colored fruit. During the fourth and fifth winters, prune heavily enough to train the tree into a spreading symmetrical shape. However, avoid pruning too heavily. When pruning peach and plum trees, remember that flowers and fruit are borne on wood that is produced the previous year. To stimulate growth of fruiting wood in the center, thin out and head back inside branches. Pruning peach and plum trees after their fourth and fifth growing seasons is mainly corrective and should be limited to the removal or cutting back of branches that interfere with the upward and outward spread of the main scaffold limbs. Training palm trees, such as apples and pears, is quite different than training peaches and plums. Rather than creating an open center, the goal is to create a pyramidal shape. Constructing this pyramid shape is called central leader training. When you have finished training your tree, the basic outline will resemble a Christmas tree in form. This shape allows the optimal penetration of light both into and between your growing trees. Training of palm trees begins immediately after the trees are planted, but before their actual growth begins. To train palm trees properly, cut them back to about 28 to 30 inches. Cutting the top out will force the first scaffold branches to form at height you desire. If limbs are already present in a good location, cut them back to a short stub, but leave the first bud on the underside to encourage growth at a better angle. When new branches reach 3 to 6 inches in length, remove any branches that are lower than 20 inches. Once you have completed this task, you will need to select and train 3 to 5 branches, which will make up the first of 3 or 4 tiers of branches. These branches should be 2 to 6 inches apart and spiral up and around the tree that you are about to prune. Train the selected branches to form a wide crotch angle by using clothespins, toothpicks, or short wires as braces. Clothespins should be used when the branches are 3 to 6 inches in length. Set the pins in such a way that the branch angle is about 90 degrees from the main trunk. To prevent girdling, remove the clothespins when shoot tissue hardens. To minimize competition, remove all other branches that develop in that area as soon as they begin to grow. The remaining 2 or 3 tiers should be developed at least 36 inches apart. Developing the third or fourth tier in apple trees will take approximately 3 to 4 years. The training procedure is the same with each tier of branches. The branches that you force into a wide angle at the base will turn and grow upward as they elongate. For continued spreading, you will need to add longer spreaders. A small board with nails driven in the ends and ground off works well. Add spreaders as needed. Don't spread too much at one time. With apple trees, you will need to brace branches to form a 35 to 45 degree angle in relation to the trunk of the tree. Longer braces can be used later to increase branch spread a little more. Limbs that are spread too horizontally will encourage undesirable, strong shoots to grow straight up from the scaffold branches. Remove any such branches as soon as possible. Apple and pear trees normally form fruit on spurs of wood that are 2 years old or older. As a result, you will need to develop fruiting branches throughout the time that you are training your trees. Develop these branches on the sides rather than the top or bottom of lateral branches. Fruit that is produced on side spurs will be shaped better and receive less sunburn. To develop good fruiting palm wood, remove vigorous competing branches that are growing straight up or down on laterals when these branches are small. You can further develop fruiting branches by heading back lateral branches. Pruning can be completed during the growing or dormant season depending on the outcome you desire. However, remember, pruning during the growing season tends to dwarf palm trees. Generally, you should confine summer pruning to shoots that are 1 year old. On shoots that are headed during the dormant season, 2 or 3 vigorous shoots usually develop from the buds immediately below the cut. Early in the season, you can remove 1 or 2 of these shoots entirely in order to direct growth in one direction. Remove growth as soon as possible unless the tree is overly vigorous and you want to slow its growth. The degree of dwarfing that results from summer pruning is related to the amount of leaves that you remove. The later in the summer season that you prune your trees and the more leaf area you remove, the greater will be the dwarfing response that you achieve. Summer pruning of palm trees promotes the development of stronger spurs and a better fruiting system in the older section of the tree. Excessive shoot growth competes for plant nutrients and consequently delays flowering. Thus, moderate shoot removal favors flower bud development. Dormant pruning is conducted for the life of your trees and has several purposes. Dormant pruning allows you to shape and train your trees, encourages new growth of your trees, and allows you to remove unwanted wood. During the first dormant season, palm trees should have a main central leader or a trunk with lateral or scaffold branches growing from them. These branches should be headed back by removing 1/4 to 1/2 of the past season growth. Always head lateral branches to an outwardly positioned bud or branch. Heading or topping palm trees allows you to optimize their growth, to stiffen them, and to encourage the development of lateral branches. Remove all laterals that are poorly positioned or too vigorous and competing with the main trunk. Another rule of thumb is to allow the growth of no more than 5 laterals per whorl, and make sure the laterals that you maintain are properly spaced. During the second growing season, train limbs as you did during the first year. Additionally, when 2 or 3 vigorous shoots develop below each winter heading cut that you made, remove all but 1 while these potentially troublesome shoots are still small. This procedure will encourage weaker side shoots. You will also want to remove all branches that develop on the main trunk that are between the desired tiers. In addition, remove any shoots that rise from the top side of lateral branches while they are still young. During the second dormancy period of palm trees, select lateral branches to make up the second and third whorl of branches. Remove branches that rub or compete with each other as well as those that grow straight up or down. Once you have removed these branches, you can head back all of the side branches that remain on each lateral. This pruning procedure will encourage further branching. Some varieties of trees naturally branch well and may need few heading type cuts. Remember, excessive pruning can delay fruiting. During the third growing season of palms, remove any upright shoots that develop on newly spread laterals. The sooner you remove these shoots, the better off the tree will be. For example, allowing these shoots to thrive will require a much larger cut that heals slowly and weakens the limb. In addition to removing excess shoots, eliminate any narrow, angled shoots that are competing with the main trunk or laterals. During the third dormant season, begin pruning by removing competing shoots and all strong upright growth that was not pruned in the summer. A simple rule for side shoots is to remove the overly vigorous ones, head shoots that demonstrate moderate vigor, and leave the rest unheaded. During the fourth summer, the tree will probably have a good fruit load. Practice fruit tree thinning in such a way that limbs are not pulled out of shape. In other words, take all of the fruit off the upper part of the central leader and from the ends of lateral branches. If these fruit are left intact, they may cause a limb or terminal break due to the added stress. During the fourth dormant season, cut the top back in order to slow the tree's growth and to develop side branches more effectively. Completing this step will allow you to safeguard against stunting in the lower portions of the tree if the main trunk of the tree grows too high. When new growth occurs below the cut, allow only one central leader to develop. During this season, you will also need to direct your efforts toward achieving optimal fruiting rather than encouraging actual tree growth. The number of heading cuts should be reduced as the tree reaches this age. If the lateral branches are long enough to fill the allotted space, try to avoid heading the terminal shoot. Instead, thin back to a weaker shoot and leave it unheaded. Beyond the fourth year, you can use the same pruning and training principles each year. Always remember that you will need to maintain a vegetative terminal shoot on the central leader. To maintain this shoot, make a heading cut into your tree's 1-year-old wood. During and after the fourth year, replace heading cuts with thinning cuts in almost every section of the tree. In the last several minutes, we've talked about a number of important issues regarding fruit tree pruning, from the tools that you need, the advantages of pruning, and the importance of considering flowering habits, tree size, pruning methods, and timing when to prune and train your fruit trees. We also have taken you through the step-by-step process of growing and maintaining your trees, whether they are peaches, nectarines and plums, or apples and pears. Perhaps the most important thing to remember, however, is that your pruning efforts will be greatly simplified if you train your trees properly during their first few years of growth. Additionally, you will optimize the productivity of your trees for a longer period of time. Apples, peaches and plums, a myriad of sizes and shapes. They have the power to keep us healthy and strengthen our minds. For further information about the proper pruning and training of fruit trees, contact your local county agent or the fruit specialist at the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service at Auburn University.